Welcome to Franklin Covey's C-Suite Conversations podcast. I'm your host, Patrick Ledden, and each week I have the opportunity to sit down and talk to an executive leader. We learn about the lessons they've learned along the way, the struggles they've faced, successes they've achieved, and everything in between. Today I'm joined by Enrique Toledo, who has over 3 decades of experience in human resources, operations, and strategy. He most recently served as Chief People Officer at Modivcare, and prior to that, he also served as the Chief People Officer at Valet Living. Enrique has led global leadership and talent operations at companies like Citigroup, and he has a wealth of information to bring to this conversation. In fact, in our conversation today, we're going to explore things like leadership development. What does it take to develop leaders, especially from a global perspective? We'll also talk about the evolving and changing role of being a chief people officer. And lastly, we'll dip our toe into the realities of things like AI and other advances that are literally shaping the places in which we work. Enrique Toledo, welcome to C-Suite Conversations.
Patrick, it's an honor. I'm humbled. I was on a ride with my son Kai, who's 13, just a few minutes ago, and we were listening to some of the podcasts and previous conversations, and he said, "Dad, why do they want to talk to you exactly?" So I hope to do him proud here and show him that.
Let's teach Kai a couple things today about all the stuff you know. Okay. If nothing else, we'll talk to an audience of one today. It's nice all the other listeners are out there, but Kai, this one's for you. Let's learn how much Dad knows. So let's just jump right into it. Leadership development. You've done a lot with developing leaders over 3 decades. And I'm just curious from your perspective, when people are listening to this conversation, whether they're looking to advance their own career and wanting to make sure that they kind of have the right experiences, the right opportunities, and not just training, but also other development opportunities. What should they be looking for? But also as a person who's been a chief people officer, like what have you seen change in how we develop people and what do they need to do to kind of get it right?
Oof. Well, I mean, I think the first thing, leadership starts from within on a personal note, and it's this understanding that we're all on a journey. So just when you think you've learned something, you realize how little you do know. And I'm experiencing that right now. But I would always say it starts by understanding that you can't really lead an organization, a team, until you can lead yourself. And I haven't figured that out yet. I'm on that journey every day, try to reflect a little bit every week, every month. So I have these temporal landmarks where I'm trying to kind of reflect and look forward and look back. So I think it starts with that. And that's not something you're going to get in a leadership development course necessarily at your employer or at a university. That's my opinion. I think secondly is understanding that this idea of leadership and development and career growth is not really a ladder. And my successor at Valet Living, and now she's a chief people officer, Nicole Davies, says it really great. It's more like a lattice. It's a career lattice, and that there's some turns, there's some sideways, there's going down. And so this understanding that it's not this perfect, escalator doesn't really work that way. And there's going to be some bumps along the way. And I think when we think about career development, leadership development in that way, I think it makes it more interesting and adventurous versus disappointing. And I think third, any good leadership development program starts with strategy. So what is the strategy of the business? Right. And so for most organizations right now, they're thinking about artificial intelligence, machine learning. So how do those leadership development programs contribute to that strategy, both the people strategy and the organizational strategy? So there's a couple layers to that, but it changes quite often. And there's a lot of really good leadership development programs, but I think they have a shelf life. They change and they have to evolve every quarter, every year.
It's interesting you say it starts with you. I think we would completely agree at Franklin Covey that, we lead ourselves first. And sometimes we miss out when we're looking to develop leaders. And I'm going to challenge the listeners, whether they're going through development themselves or they're developing others, or maybe doing a little bit of both at times, which is probably true for many, to think about what are you doing to help people understand that they have agency and they're responsible for their own choices. And they really start by, doing kind of the hard work, which is the self work, before you start doing other things like, let me tell you the 10 things you need to do to be a great leader.
I agree. It's funny. It reminds me, I was probably 18, 19 years old. I was waiting tables. I was trying to be a student and a student athlete. and I waited some tables on the side. And
By
I
the way,
remember,
that's a job where you can learn a lot, right?
yeah,
Waiting tables,
love
service
it.
jobs for sure, but definitely waiting tables.
It's amazing. And I was really shy, but I was fast and I was thoughtful about how I put together the strategy of waiting tables. This is strategy, right? But I remember I had a repeat client, and he just one day he's like, "Hey, I want to give you this book," and it was the Covey Seven Habits of Successful. Yeah, and I still have that, and it's so funny how that I consumed that book and I read it a couple of times. This is 1991,
Yeah, it was really new.
but it
Yeah.
was the start. It was the start of that like individual journey on leadership and development.
It's funny. I actually saw the book around the same time. So I've been working with Franklin Covey for 20 some years now, but my wife put that book on my nightstand, 1991, same time as you. And at the time, it was funny. I wasn't as self-aware perhaps as you were. I kind of looked at this like, I don't need this, highly effective people, whatever. And I put it underneath my nightstand, and then she put it back on top of my nightstand. I did that 2 or 3 times until I finally cracked it open. So kudos to you, Enrique, for realizing right away, hey, there might be something between these two hardcovers that could be helpful to me.
Well, sometimes it takes someone, a client, and I always wish I could run into that person, remember his name. But he, remember he said, he's like, you've got some potential.
Hmm.
And he gave me the book and he just walked away. So I wonder, right? Game changer when you think
Yeah.
about how that impacts your life.
It's interesting you said that you saw potential. I think you said, because Stephen Covey would say that leadership is seeing the worth and potential in someone and speaking it to them so clearly they begin to see it in themselves. And that's exactly what was happening there. And I love that definition that he used. And I think that's so true, that there's opportunities in life both to have kind of people touch us, even if we don't remember exactly who they are or what their name was in this instance, but we remember that situation.
Right.
Or conversely, part of the leadership journey, and you said it's not a ladder, it's a lattice, and it can be messy, is also taking the opportunity to kind of touch other people and help other people along the way. We don't have to wait for the company to come in and develop us. We can do it in all sorts of ways with one another.
I agree 100%. Yeah. And it is it really is an exercise. Um, I'm a big journal note taker. And I think reflecting on the to done list is important.
Yeah.
And there's so much that we do in the day. We just reflect on what we haven't done, but there's a lot of great things that we do. So I think reflection is really important.
It's funny. You mentioned earlier when you were saying that we were just mentioning like career ladder and how it's not a perfect ladder. It's more of a lattice, as one of your colleagues said. I think I may have mentioned this on the podcast before. So if listeners hear it, forgive me. But the last 11 years or so, I've been a professor at Vanderbilt University in Nashville, Tennessee. And there'll be an occasion when a student, maybe they see, my LinkedIn profile or something like that, and they'll want to talk to me and say, hey, Professor Ledden, how can we have a career like yours? And one thing I often quickly tell them is, A, I don't know if you want a career like mine. You want to have your career. But B is you got to recognize that this is like the highlight reel.
Yeah.
This is the stuff that went well. I mean, most of them aren't like, let me tell the whole world how mediocre I am and a complete miserable failure at times. It's typically like, here's the things I accomplished or whatever it might be. But the lessons happen in the white space, happen in the things that aren't listed on the resume, that might come out in conversation, but they're the moments where you're serving the table at the restaurant and you're bringing the wrong food to the wrong people at the wrong time, type of thing. You learn some stuff along the way, as opposed to just let me show you the thing when everything was perfect.
You know what? It actually reminds me of a great book that I read a few months ago by Shugoishi. I can't remember the title, but it's The Three Dimensions of Happiness, I want to say. But he talks about psychological richness. And psychological richness is about those ups and downs and the failures. That's what makes it exciting. But we don't see that in the highlight reels, right? We don't see all the mistakes or the things we said that we shouldn't have said, or the things we wrote that we shouldn't have written, right? Or just in general, the career decisions that we make and choices in work. So no, I agree with you 100%.
There's an interesting thing that happens, at least I think it is. I'm curious to see what you think, where there's this, we know we learn when things are messy and we're uncomfortable and we're allowed to fail a little bit and kind of pick ourselves up and dust ourselves off and try. We know we learn through all of that. But we also have this situation organizationally where we feel like, gosh, there's so many challenges going on in the workplace right now, and I'm seeing whether it's AI is taking jobs away or changing jobs or whatever it might be, or the economy's tough and so there's all of a sudden this like, I can't show the messy stuff, I can't mess up in front of my boss, I can't do these type of things, and there's like this interesting convergence of two issues where the only way you get better is to mess up, but you feel like you can't mess up. I'm sure you see it all the time. And what can we do to help leaders and organizations to get better at this?
It's interesting. It reminds me, the two CEOs, Heath Sampson at Modivcare and also Sean Handrahan at Valet, they're the two that come to mind. I think it comes with being genuine, and they both are very genuine, and they talk about the mistakes they made and the successes. And I think as a CEO or as a C-suite executive is just being honest, especially now with communications, whether we, in both of our organizations, we had podcasts, we had internal podcasts that we did. And, I would interview Sean or I would interview Heath, and they talk about their failures or their struggles or the things they haven't figured out. And I think so, to your question, to your point, I think it's just being honest that we're still a work in progress. And it starts with that CEO and this leadership, that it's not just the highlight reel, it's the things that we're working through. And both of those leaders, super genuine, very transparent. And so I think that's where it starts. And it does ripple. It has this beautiful ripple effect if done well.
It's interesting. So I started my career as far as like formal leadership in the Army. So I was a lieutenant in the Army. And, it's an interesting dynamic because you get thrown into a platoon and there's 38 people, many of which are older than you, kind of reporting to you. And I didn't take long to realize like what little rank I had on my collar is not what I want to use to kind of encourage them to follow me. But there's other ways to do it. And then years later, when I was working, kind of teaching more in school and just reading research about how to be an effective professor, I remember reading this thing that in hindsight, I'm like, I wish I'd read this years ago. And B, I kind of stumbled into it on my own. So I'm just curious to see what you think about this, because I think it applies not just to teaching, but also just leading in general. What it was talking about was this idea that when you start teaching something or you're facilitating a workshop or whatever it might be, the typical thing we're concerned with most is, do I look okay? Am I dressed right? Am I saying, do I look goofy? Are the students like kind of laughing at me? I mean, there's all that kind of going on in your head. Like, do I look right for the role? And then the second thing, once we get past that a little bit, we start going, do I know the content well? Not only do I look like I should be standing up here and I'm not like, I don't have my no shoes on or something, but I look right. But then also I know the content. And then the third thing is actually, are people learning?
Yeah.
And it's so backwards, right? But it's the way we kind of progress through things. And I think as a leader, it's very similar. Do I look like a leader? Am I acting like a leader? Do I know what it means to be a leader? And then ultimately get like, am I developing my people? Am I helping my people be the best versions of themselves? And it's kind of so backwards, I think, as opposed to if I go in the door saying, I don't really care how I look necessarily, if that makes sense. I mean, I don't want to look completely foolish, but I don't really care how I look. I don't really care if I know everything, because I know I won't. But what I start with, I got great people. They're really talented. My job is just to unleash that talent and to get out of their way.
Yeah, a couple of thoughts on that. So first of all, I'm sitting here, as I mentioned to you, wondering why you want to talk to me.
Right? Tell Kai you have lots of great things to say. Hang in there, Kai. Here it comes.
But I think it's okay. By the way, if anyone is listening and they're early in career, I don't know. I haven't figured it out. I'm still not sure that I belong in the boardroom. But I do, but I'm there and I'm ready and I'm prepared. And I don't think that's a bad thing.
Yeah.
I think it's okay because that means you care. That means I use the example every time. So I tried to play basketball at Georgia State. I was a walk-on and played high school basketball. But anytime, whether it's pickup, if I go to the Y, which I don't often to play basketball, but I literally get sick to my stomach to play pickup.
Yeah.
It's because I care, and then it goes away, right? And so I think to have that sense of imposter syndrome, I think is a good thing, right? Because it shows humility, it shows that you're learning, you're growing, that you care about something. So I think it never goes away, and I hope it doesn't ever go away. I hope I never go into a board meeting feeling like, oh, I got this figured out, right? So that's one thing. The other thing, which I've tried to do more and more, is as I learn a topic or something, is sharing it and teaching it. Even though I feel like I'm a beginner, I think it helps tremendously to not wait to that perfect moment where you're intermediary. I think it's okay to share and teach others when you're just beginning. And then you
Yeah.
really learn. I think Adam Grant may have talked about that in Hidden Potential, but he says the people that really, there's a name for it, but there are individuals that can learn languages super fast, and it's because they're fearless. They're like,
Yeah.
I don't know, I'm going to probably say the wrong thing, but I'm going to do it. And so they have this ability, this fearlessness to learn a language very fast. So anyway, so a little bit of a different twist on what you shared, but um, yeah, I don't think it ever goes away, this feeling of feeling like an imposter.
I think there's something really valuable in using another sports analogy of like wanting to have the bat in your hand and step up to the plate. Like you want that, but at the same time recognizing that the nerves are going to be kicking in your stomach at this. It's like it's okay to have both of those things going on. In fact, the ability to kind of manage both of those things simultaneously is really critical, and also just lets you know you're alive, if nothing else, right in that moment.
Absolutely. And I think, again, I don't know the science behind this, but I feel like there's some, it's like your mind and your body getting ready.
Mm-hmm.
It's like adrenaline, right? And so that worry, am I going on stage? I'm going to talk to a bunch of people, or I'm going walking into a classroom. It's probably your mind and your body getting you psyched up for what's ahead.
Yeah, I think a lot of times when you don't have a little bit of hesitation or a little bit of concern, maybe you're lacking a little self awareness sometimes, or when you feel like you're all that and you got it, bringing the ball down court, going back to the basketball analogy, is the
Exactly.
right the time when somebody's going to pick your pocket and take that ball right away from you, right? That steal
Exactly.
happens, yeah,
Happens
yeah.
at work. Yeah.
So speaking of, walking into those boardrooms as a C-suite conversation podcast, we're talking to a lot of executives who, like yourself, are in those rooms and in those conversations. And sometimes people listening to the podcast want to know that because they want to be in that room, but other times it's just a little bit of curiosity about what's going on in there and what's being talked about. And so you mentioned early on when you and I were talking before we hit record, and I mentioned it in the beginning of the podcast, kind of as we walked into introducing you, that you've seen some evolution and changes in the chief people officer role.
Yeah.
How is it changing and evolving? What's being expected of people in that role differently, and what are some of the challenges they're seeing?
Well, I mean, I think first of all, so the first part of that, you know, most boards now, they want to hear from the CPO. They want to understand what's happening from a people and culture perspective, because they recognize that change management, communication is the driving force for transformation. Mm-hmm. So they want to hear. And so you got to be ready as a CPO to be able to speak to that.
Which is an interesting thing because I remember when I was working on my master's a few decades ago, in a class around human resources, talking about how so many people in the HR space want the ears of the CEO, and they're struggling to get it. And now it's kind of gone the other way. You're getting it; they want to know, but it's like, oh my gosh, now I'm here.
You said it, Patrick. That was exactly right. I remember, and again, I'm dating myself, but in the early '90s. Every HR person knows this phrase because it was very common. It was, you just want to have a seat at the table. Mm-hmm. That was it, right? And then eventually evolved. Dr. Ulrich out of University of Michigan Ross really introduced this idea of creating value as an HR professional and having this outside-in view, and building programs. And then, I'm skipping a couple of stages, and then COVID happened. And then the pandemic, and everyone was like, oh, wait a second, this people stuff is pretty important. How do we, lead a team that's remote? How do we continue business continuity? How do we keep our team members safe? How do we handle all the regulatory and compliance for every municipality, and how do we do that? How do we communicate? Um, and I really believe the role of the head of HR has been elevated since 2020.
Mm.
And we're now in the advent, I believe, of seeing these HR leaders play a more prominent role in the board, in the XCOM, in the executive committee. So now they're looking at us, not just with policies, which is really important, policies, recruiting, talent, learning development, all really important, but those are table stakes now. So now they're asking, hey, how do you handle change? How are we going to make this change? What's the change management frameworks that we're going to use? How are we going to communicate? Right? How do we manage all of that? How do we deal with AI? By the way, I love Dr. Ethan Malik out of Wharton. He says AI is a people issue. It's a CPO issue. So are we ready as CPOs to kind of lead this agentic and human workforce?
Yeah.
So
'Cause
that's the next evolution.
you got to have that carbon workforce, us carbon based, and you have the silicone based workforce now. And
Totally.
how do these work together? Yeah.
Yeah, so it's a different ballgame. I mean, CPOs, CHROs, they're now we're talking about driving the business.
Yeah, it's interesting you said how you were going through that. One thing I started to smirk at was when you mentioned the idea of well, you just said at the end, like driving the business and understanding business strategy more and sitting at the table and having this conversation. And it's more than policies as important as they are. Because at Franklin Covey, we recently did a number of marketing events, like live marketing events. And in that, we talked about you have your strategy, but then you also need to be able to perform against your strategy, obviously. And it's kind of like strategy times performance gives you greatness over time. And when we think about like what's happening in that performance block, that's what keeps people awake at night. Like, okay, are they going to do it, or are they doing it, or I told them 100 times and they're still not doing it, or they did it great this time. Can we get more of that? I mean, there's a lot going on, and we tend to throw things at it that fall in the category of like policies and programs and things like that are table stakes, as you said. Like you need these things. You have to have a policy about X, Y, Z.
Yeah.
But the reality is that policy alone is never going to like make people like really engaged at work because there's this policy. That policy is never going to be as inclusive or address every issue that creative people can create that might cause another policy to have to be written, right? So in addition to like policies and programs, you also need to have a really good understanding of things like culture and cadence and contributors. And I think these are areas where the chief people officers of the world and people listening from that kind of side of the house, if you will, can realize, gosh, how do we can connect our people strategy to our organizational business strategy.
That's exactly right. And then if we fast forward a little bit, I think about 2023. So 2023, if you think about where we were with AI and now where we're at, I just only imagine where we're going to be in 2030. But I think about that role, like you think about love finance and the things that we do, a lot of applications in AI, certainly the tech. You look at every function, marketing, same with people in HR, but like that skill set of leadership and people, change management, communications, culture, very prominent.
Yeah.
It's going to be so important.
So it kind of sounds a little bit like we're like standing on the edge of this bold new future that's going to happen. So I'll ask you this question. What are you excited about in this bold new future?
Everything. I'll share with you kind of a personal kind of story. So during this break, I'm focused on family, self, a lot of reflection. I'm talking to my personal board of directors regularly, which my wife is the chairman. But I have people that I talk to about like, all right, now what next? Let's think about like what I'm going to do, what we're going to do. One of the things I noted, I did some health assessments and deep analysis with my primary and got to work on the blood pressure. So I built a custom solution and I've been working on it for a week and a half, 2 weeks. the numbers, the data, the metrics are showing huge improvements by just me interacting with, hey, how's this meal versus this meal? What about this? Let me take a screenshot of these nutrition ingredients. And my point is game changers, everything. So everything that we think about in our life, obviously there are me to do things that I can't give away. It's what keeps me as a human, right? Mm-hmm. But I think it's being adventurous, jumping in, exploring, finding the edges of what we can do with artificial intelligence and machine learning. And there's so much. And so I think, it's being fearless when it comes to artificial intelligence. It's going to be an exciting time. Now, I will say, I've often said that if there are not moments periodically where you're absolutely terrified, then you're not using it enough. And I've had those moments where the hair on my arm standing, I'm like, oh my gosh, like what's happening to me? Who am I going to be? Yeah. What am I leaving behind? And then it quickly goes away. I'm like, okay, let's get back to work, right? So I think it's just jumping in. But I know everyone's different change curve, different places. And as leaders, we got to really help people through that process.
There's a lot of different ways where using your expression, like the hair stands up on your arm. Like I was showing my dad, my dad will be 94 in just a couple of days from when we're recording this right now. And I was showing him just ChatGPT and like, okay, Dad, check this out. I can ask ChatGPT to tell me a story about what does my dog do, my dog named Magnus, do when I'm not at home. And it writes a story and I'm reading it to him. My dad's like, oh my goodness. So that makes your hair stand up a little bit, like the capability of it. But then and this kind of goes full circle back to the beginning, there's this part that happens. Well, if stuff that I'm doing historically can be automated or can be done while I'm sleeping because the system's going to run it, what am I going to do? And the question becomes, well, you're going to do higher level thinking and you're going to do more communication and more collaboration and all the stuff you say you want to do. And it's like, yeah, but now I got to do it. And that's kind of scary, right? Because sometimes it's easier to do like these random acts of daily trivia than it is to roll your sleeves up and do some better analysis or have some tougher conversations or do the stuff that really humans are uniquely wired to do.
Yeah, I have this image, and I was telling Heath just a couple of weeks ago, the CEO at Modivcare, because he and I probably are the biggest, like really big users and like AI geeks, I would say. But I was telling him it almost feels like, so before we were walking through this forest to try to figure out how to continue to transform the business, grow the business, right, and things we think about, all of a sudden, using digital tools, we have like a fast track to a place it would have taken us a long time to get to. And so now we're looking around in this forest and we're like, we've not been here before. And it only took us like 5 minutes to get here. There's still more to do, but this is a new place. There's new data. There's new things to think about. So let's take advantage of that. Let's explore this new place, this new forest of information, so we can continue to transform and grow the business. I think if we think about it that way versus giving something up, I think it's really helpful.
I so agree. To me, it kind of goes all the way back to the conversation about picking up the book, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. Because what Stephen talked about in that book is there's this idea of like, there's these principles of human behavior and you can ignore them, but they're going to act on you. Type of thing, like gravity would be, from a physics perspective. The same thing around what makes people effective. And I think AI or other technology components that have fast forwarded us to another part of the forest and have us going, holy cow, I didn't even know that tree existed or this was possible or whatever it might be. At the end of the day, though, we still need to kind of lean into things that make people effective. So AI is a thought partner for us. It's not a person, but it's a system that, or this entity that does some of the things that are a bit mundane sometimes, and it does them highly accurate and a lot cheaper than I could do them, which leaves me to a chance to kind of do those things that you talked about being adventurous and creative and curious. It allows me to kind of explore those trees in the woods we didn't even know existed.
Totally. I'll give you one example. So I was fortunate. Heath was generous enough to allow me to run our transportation ops business while I was the head of HR for a period of time. And so it was really great. So I was curious. And we had these client calls internally about all of our different clients, and 20 a week, and I couldn't make all of them, right? And
Yeah.
so we knew, and we told everyone, hey, we're going to record these. We're going to have transcript. We're going to use, Copilot. But as an example, I would spend a little bit of time utilizing those transcripts, which the team knew, and it would help inform me what the team needed. I was able to understand what is the engagement, what are their struggles, what were the action items. So I was able to pop into those client meetings, and I knew which one to go to using data and artificial intelligence, and we were informed. And so we were able to find solutions a little bit faster. That's a new part of the forest that hadn't been there before.
Yeah.
Wasn't going to get there without those tools. So again, I think it's just being adventurous and exploring and learning along the way. And it's just, I don't know, maybe we're in the second inning. We're in the bottom of the first of this thing. I don't know.
I don't either. I think being curious is so critical. I was actually talking to somebody not that long ago who was concerned about some of the advances with AI because he felt like it was really going to take his job away. And he had some realistic concerns. He did a lot of writing for his business. And he's like, my CEO just used ChatGPT to write something that in the past I would have written, type of thing. And as we were talking, I just said, well, it's a disruption for sure. It's changing things pretty quickly. But could you see a world where you'll actually be more valuable to the organization, not less valuable with AI? And he's for a moment, he's like, no, maybe. Actually, yeah. He kind of went through that process. And by the time it was over, he was like energized by, I guess he was fearful that tree was going to fall over in the forest and hit him. But now he realized I can actually scale that thing and see something really cool.
Totally. I agree. And I think we all have to go through. It's funny that we had a similar conversation in communications in corporate comm. And to pick on that particular function a little bit, a lot of that function's been communicating, but not listening. So now, guess what? We should be doing more listening in corporate communications that we couldn't before because we didn't have time. So that we can then use some digital tools to make the communication even better. So to your point, your friend, it's a great opportunity for us to, and those are things that those are humans, I think.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, hey, Enrique, I really enjoyed this conversation. And I know the listeners did as well. I mean, this was a conversation, right? Talk about listening and talking and sharing. And, I remember reading one time it said that the biggest challenge with communication is the illusion that it actually even happened. And I think it really happened today. And I hope the listeners, took the time to take a few notes about what Enrique shared. And Kai, take some notes yourself, my friend, because your dad's got a lot of brilliance between those two ears. But thanks so much for joining us today. I really enjoyed having you on C-Suite Conversations, and I wish you the best of luck. Please let us know what comes next as you go into the next. Yeah, so excited for you.
Congratulations, Patrick. You got a great podcast and a lot of really important topics that you're raising. So I'm honored to be a part of the conversation.
We were honored to have you. And folks, that's all we have for today. Thanks so much for joining us for Franklin Covey's C-Suite Conversations. And big thanks to Enrique. Thanks for joining us today, my friend, for sharing your insights, to helping us think about not just individually, like how we lead ourselves, but how do we help individuals across our organization be more effective? And how do we not run away from some of these things that are coming our direction, but actually embrace them, because they might take us to, as you said, a new place in the forest. I'm Dr. Patrick Ledden. Thanks so much for joining us. Now go make it a great day.